Welcome, Bob. This has been a long time in the making. We've been talking about this podcast for quite a while. So finally we're here. I'm excited to get some of these questions out there. But I kind of build this as we were looking at it and we were going over the conversations and getting to this point. And we looked at what we've talked about in the past. I kind of build this pig roast, the big dig, and tropical islands. That's really what we're going to talk about today, and all construction in between. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you're doing now? Sheppard Construction and Development. What are you doing today?
First of all, thank you for having me. And Sheppard Construction and Development is part of Sheppard Investment Company. We have a residential and commercial building group that works out of Hingham, Mass. We do tenant fit out on the commercial side, small commercial buildings, and we maintain our own real estate. On the residential side, we do anything from kitchen and bath renovations up to new single-family homes.
Very large single-family homes at that, for the most part, and we'll get to that. But so that's one thing that's always intrigued me about your business. We've had many conversations about business as I moved through and thought about doing some development and whatnot. We've had conversations about what you've done in the past and what you're currently doing. And one thing that always struck me is your business is kind of like the stock market, what you're supposed to be doing in the stock market. You're diversified. You're on the commercial side, you're on the residential side, and you transition from both seamlessly. On your end, what do you think? What's the biggest challenge having a company that's diversified like that, knowing codes, knowing the market, having help to perform the work? What is the biggest issue with transitioning from residential to commercial or vice versa?
There's really not a lot of difference on the light commercial versus large residential. You need the same group of people. Different subs, obviously, doing different work. More life safety is involved in the commercial work, where we have to know more about that aspect of the job. But on the residential side, it's the same. We've had a great stable of subcontractors over the years that have followed us and continue to work with us. So that's always been a blessing on our side of the ledger.
And do you have the same subs? Do you use the same subs on the commercial side that you use on the residential side?
Not always. We have larger electricians and plumbers who will do larger commercial plumbing and electrical work. Short of that, we use the same plasterers, drywall guys. Drop ceilings are not typically in a residential setting, but it is in most commercial settings. So we have different subs in those categories, but we do cross over with painting and some of the other aspects of the jobs.
And then just getting help. I know it's a lot of, contractors and developers that I talk to these days, getting people in reliable work, reliable help to perform these jobs and get these jobs done in-house in the companies. What's the challenge right now out there in getting reliable people, getting people to actually run these jobs and perform the work for you? Not necessarily subs, but people for your company. You see a challenge?
Yeah, there's a limited number of really good, experienced project supervisors out there. And there's not many young people coming into our industry. So the push is to try to pique an interest of some of the younger guys to get on board and work their way into the industry so that at some point they're going to be that experienced guy that we're losing right now and nobody's backfilling it.
Right.
So there's a educational push going on all the way back to the Builders Association, which we're part of, trying to get young people into the industry and have a real solid interest in, because not everyone's a college graduate. Not everybody wants to go to college. We have a lot of college graduates with degrees that have come back to the industry because that's their first love.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's from what I've been hearing in the field, getting reliable people to work for you. Right now, it's just the pool is so thin, and it's not unique to what you're doing. It's all over the place, and there's some unique incentives out there that some of the larger companies are offering just to bring people in to get them back to the construction industry. But if they had known your experience and your knowledge, I think you'd be a fantastic mentor for anybody that'd be coming in to the business to work. But so you and I have these kind of parallel. We met Boston Junior Terriers. Your son was playing for me for the Boston Junior Terriers. At the time, I was in the Carpenters Union, and it wasn't until we started having discussions about construction and that we realized all these parallel connections that we never knew about until we talked about them later on. Most of them centered around a certain union company, but the first one that we talked about was I had a pig roast in my backyard. Bought a house as a young buck and wanted to have a big pig roast when I got the occupancy. And my brother at the time was on the big dig working for Modern Continental, and I said, look, I need somebody to do a pig roast in my backyard. He said, oh, I have Dave. Dave will come out and Dave will do the pig roast. So I call up Dave, and Dave shows up, and he has a 150 gallon, 500 gallon oil tank that's cut in half that's been made into a pig roast. 5 o'clock in the morning, Dave started the pig and stayed all day. Years later, I said to you at one of the Terriers games, hey, I had this guy, his last name was Sheppard too. He was in my backyard all day when I had my housewarming. He says, yeah, that was my brother. He worked for Modern at the time and would make those oil barrels. So that was that's when I found out you had the connection to Modern. Your brother Dave worked for Modern. And, that's when I realized you had such a tie to Modern Continental. There's a few more, but how did you end up getting involved at Modern Continental?
It goes way back, actually, to 1979 when I started. My wife was best friends with Les's daughter.
Les Marino?
Les Marino, yes. And so that was the introduction to me meeting Les. I used to go over there and, visit with Judy and my wife, Judy, and her friend. And he took an interest in me. I don't know why. And one day he said to his daughter, do you think that Bob would come in for an interview? We're looking for a guy. So I went to his house. That's where he interviewed everybody.
Right.
In the lower level of his house in Quincy at the time. And I sat with him and Ken Anderson, who was Les's partner, and they drilled me for like 2 hours.
Right. About
my background and where I came from. I grew up in Michigan on a dairy farm, and I have 7 brothers and sisters, and they're all in Michigan. So they were fascinated with the fact that I was grown up as a farmer, and Les had this fascination with farming. He had his own little farm in Quincy, and it was a terrific garden. Everybody loved it. And that led to, just me working there. He hired me as a property manager to manage be an assistant manager to his wife's cousin, who was going to run the rooming house in the Back Bay.
Okay.
So I went over there and started doing that, and then there was a downturn in the real estate market in the early 80s. So we sold that building. He brought me inside to the purchasing department. And from there, I started working in the real estate group with a guy named Brad Bumpus, who headed up the real estate group for Modern at the time. Things started to get real hot and heavy in the mid-'80s, and Brad decided to go out and do something on his own. So I was kind of left there to pick up the pieces.
Watching the shop.
Yeah.
Yep.
And from there, it just, expanded.
So what was, at that time, people obviously equate Modern with one thing most of the time, and that's the big dig, which we'll get to in a little bit. But what was the structure? What was Modern doing then? What were they Like I don't even know. I know all the stories about the Big Dig. I worked for Modern, and I'll get to that story as well. Our conversations about Les were pretty different when we first started talking about Modern Continental. But what was the makeup of the company? Were they just a property management company? Were they heavy?
No, they were heavy and highway, doing heavy and highway construction work. But along the way, they would buy parcels of land to stock materials on or equipment on. And pretty soon they had this collection of land and buildings that they needed someone to take care of. And then that was what Brad started. And then Brad started buying buildings that needed to be managed. And that's how I came into play. And at that point, the real estate group just, continued to chug along with the construction group. Construction company absolutely drove the bus for sure.
Right.
I mean, the volumes got to be over $1 billion at the end. So they were the driver. We were kind of picking up the pieces in the real estate group as we went along. Whatever we could afford to invest in real estate, we did.
Right.
We bought buildings and renovated buildings and managed buildings, and we built a restaurant, a medical center. So we've had several different, and we bought a farm in Natick.
So, we hit the one of the topics that I'm interested in. We've had these conversations, but so my history, again, a parallel universe. You and I worked for Modern on the Big Dig when I was in the Carpenters Union, and I was the last one in, the last journeyman in on the project that we were working on. It was the 90-93 interchange, and we had one set of tools for two crews. One was on one side of the Mass Pike, and one was on the other side of the Mass Pike. And if anybody who knows the 90-93 at that time, you had to walk a half a mile to get to the other side, even though it was the same project. So we were standing around literally waiting for a skill saw, a circular saw one day, so I could cut shims for some forms. And just before lunch, and I look up, and there's this gentleman in the sun. You can leaning over the hole, looking down. We were 25, 30 feet down in the hole and leaning over. And we go to lunch, and the steward for the project, Arthur Rizzi, comes over to me and says, "Mike, grab your tools. You got to go home." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "The old man laid you off." So I was laid off not by somebody on the project, but by Les Marino himself. At the time, come to find out, it was when the pinch was on about the money and the spending on the Big Dig, and I was one of the sacrificial lambs at that point. And I remember
wrong place, wrong time.
Wrong place, wrong time, which is fine. Go to the hall. I end up back out the following day, but it was interesting. My claim to fame on that project was I got laid off by the Big Dig czar himself. And I had a bitter taste in my mouth at that point. I had just started, bought a house, had a family going, and I kind of resented it. And I didn't know what I actually resented. And then my mind was somewhat changed because you enlightened me on the type of person Les was. So,
right.
Like, who was Les Marino? You know him probably just as good as anybody. And I'll just say, if you were to Google Les Marino right now, a lot of the things that are online or a lot of the news stories are negative because of the involvement in the Big Dig and whatnot. But you know a different Les Marino. Who was Les? Who was Les Marino?
Les Marino is someone that nobody even would dream that some of the things that this guy has done over the years for people. He is still to this day one of the most giving people I've ever run into in my life. He gave people jobs. He gave people opportunities. He gave people education that they would never have been able to get without his involvement. He was the most unselfish person with anything you needed. If you walked into his office and said, "Les, my car broke down. I don't have any money. I need a car to get to work," you'd have a car by the end of the day. There was an incident in our office. I was running the real estate group, and I got a call to come down to his office. there was a young lady in the office who worked for us. She was going to lose her house. She had 2 young kids and not a very supportive husband, to put it at the least. I sat down. He said, "Bob, we got to help." I said, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" "Pay off her mortgage so that she can sleep at night to know that her kids will have a place to live."
Right.
Those kind of things never hit the newspaper.
Right.
Those kind of things. He gave money to Cambridge, Rindge, and Latin for years for scholarships for kids that couldn't afford to pay their tuition. Nobody writes about that. Those are the kind of things that Les did for people. And I've got hundreds of those stories too. It's not just those couple samples, but when I adopted my daughter, my oldest daughter, I said, Les came to me and he said, "I know your wife's teaching, but she shouldn't be teaching anymore. We're going to give you a raise so that your wife can stay home and take care of the new baby."
Right.
Those are the kind of stories that never get told about Les. The farm is another thing. He bought the farm, and we always joke about that. He bought the farm, but he bought the farm in Natick and started growing vegetables. And his goal was to make it open to the public, to let everybody get in and see how things grow and how you can, how animals are raised and all the features of things that inner city kids don't necessarily get to see.
Right.
And he spent a lot of money out there doing some stuff just so that other people could enjoy it. Mm-hmm. He'd give away produce to people he knew were in need, the food pantries, whoever needed something, he was always there to give it to them.
It's interesting that, back then, as you say, he was, dedicated to providing education, dedicated to his employees. Because as I see right now, and Joe Kelly and I, as we deal with different companies, we're finding that the most successful companies are those companies that are taking care of their employees. There are entire departments now within companies that do just that take care of the employees. So even though it probably wasn't formalized back then, that was his persona, it seems like, to take care of the employees. So my next question was going to be, what was his philosophy? But I think it's kind of two-pronged here. Is what's his philosophy seems like more formal than what Les was all about when he ran his business. It almost seems like he ran the business like a family.
He did. The company was totally put together with a lot of young people that grew up in the company together. All of the top executives at the end were all guys that started in their early 20s, right out of college. And we all worked together in different departments, but all came together to make the company work. One thing Les mandated was your work is your work, and you got to get the work done. And there's a place for everyone. You get an employee, you think, he's really not going to fit. He used to say to us, it's your job to find a place for him to fit.
Right.
He may not be, the guy you thought you brought him in to be, but there's a spot for him. You got to find it. And that was his philosophy with human beings. Mm-hmm. It's just, he had a very humane side of him that people don't realize. He was tough to work with. He wouldn't take no for an answer. He, we had company meetings Friday afternoons at 4:30. Everybody wants to go home for the weekend, but his philosophy was we need to talk about what happened for the week, and we'd have a beer and we'd talk about, what was going on, and then at the end of the day, you go home. Today, you wouldn't get employees to do that.
Right.
You're just not going to, it's a different world 20 years ago than it is today. But his philosophy was you needed to be involved in your work. You needed to know what your work was and where it was going. So, and in the early years when we were small enough, every Sunday night you had to call Les at his house and talk about what you were planning to do for the next
coming
week.
week.
Every Sunday. And if you miss the call, he'd be calling you.
Right.
So,
Right. Wow, that's interesting. And again, I think some of these companies are trying to bring it back home a little bit and bring it in house, and less. Seems like he was doing that back then, and now you have these companies that are moving back towards that with they have people for people, essentially, is what they have, and
right.
that seems like that's what his philosophy was, to run it as a family.
He was a huge visionary too. He thought about things that are happening before they really happened. The holistic health center we opened was something that people were laughing at him about.
So that's that's brand new to me. And
Yeah.
I know we're going to get into some of these acquisitions that I know you were a part of and try to figure out how and what. I'm getting a little bit of it now, a little bit more than we've discussed, at least a little bit more than we've discussed before a bottle of wine that I can remember, right? So what was the deal with the Holistic Health Center? Where was it?
He believed in natural healing and not necessarily taking pills, and he was totally involved in eating properly, exercise, and good health care. And good health care, in his opinion, was holistic health.
Right.
My part of the holistic health was only to build a building and put the people in there. I don't know.
He didn't take part in that?
I don't know anything about holistic health. As you can see, looking across the table, I'm not your specimen of.
Where was this? Where was this?
It was on Mass Ave in Cambridge, North Cambridge, right down the street from the office.
The office, right.
We built it originally as an office, and we leased it to an interior design group that then went broke. And so Les started studying and getting into this holistic medicine thing. So he said, let's put a holistic he found these doctors and he put them all together and put them in that building, and then it just took off from there.
And was it a private group? Was it an open? What was that?
Yeah, it was a private group of doctors and nutritionists and chiropractors and all kinds of medical people.
So that's new to me. I didn't know about the Holistic Health Center, and that kind of the first venture outside of Modern, other than the construction side. Was that his first venture outside of Modern?
No, we had a fish company.
Okay, let's keep going. That's
early on in the early '80s. We owned a fish company. I don't know how we got into it, but I know that Brad Bumpus was in charge of it at the time. And
this was acquired it was purchased?
This was started. Les met some guy on an airplane that told him that Japan needed all kinds of fish, processed fish. So
right.
I don't know how the venture came about, but they ended up with a fish company, rented a warehouse in Chelsea, processed all the fish.
And were those Modern employees?
They were Modern employees, laborers.
Do you remember the name of what the name of the company was?
I don't.
It wasn't Modern Fish Company?
No, it was.
That's fine.
I don't remember the name of the company.
Oh, that's another one.
And then we got into shipping lobsters to Japan.
Okay.
And that didn't work out so good. We ended up with a boatload of lobsters going over there that ended up dead.
All right.
So that didn't work too well. So we got out of the fish business in the early 80s and then
right.
started on expanding the real estate group, doing subdivisions. We bought a big property up in North Reading.
So as the 80s, Les started to dip into
more real
residential?
estate. Yeah.
Okay.
We were doing buildings in the Back Bay, the brownstones, renovating them, turning them into condos. We did about 19 buildings in the Back Bay over the years. But the big residential push was North Reading. We bought a large tract of land and subdivided it into 200 house lots and started building homes.
So single-family homes.
Single-family homes, yep. And that's really the foray into how we expanded the real estate group.
And at this time, you were running the real estate group?
Yeah, I was. We were doing subdivisions down the Cape. We've built probably 500 or 600 homes on the Cape over the years, vacation homes. And then North Reading came along. We bought that and started that. And then as we expanded the real estate group, we started buying some office buildings downtown. We then went and renovated 470 Atlantic Ave. We bought that building and added a story to it as the story goes.
So for a timeline sense, I'm always one of these people that says, okay, this was going on in the United States at this time and what was going on. I always need to know what's going. So you were in the real estate business at this point. You acquired North Reading, and then Modern on the other side, in the heavy highway. Well, first of all, how many employees at this time do you think Modern had? And were they national at this point?
In the mid '80s? No, we weren't national at the time. We were just starting the first bit of projects for the Big Dig.
Okay.
Atlantic Ave.
So you just...
A lot of utility transfers that they were doing. And Ken Anderson, Les's partner, was in charge of that with some of the other guys. They really come up with a method of doing the utility relocation, and they were very successful in doing it. So that just catapulted us to the next job on the Big Dig, and then we brought in to get to some of the bigger work that we ended up doing down the road is we partnered with Obayashi.
Okay.
They had huge bonding capacity at the time, so we did several jobs with them.
And then when did Modern really go national? I know they were in 20 some odd states.
Not until the, I would say, the late 90s, early 2000s.
And that was taking heavy highway in other parts?
Yeah. We went to California. We went to Utah. We went to Washington, D.C. We went to Florida.
Went some other places that we'll talk
Virginia.
about as well. Okay, so that gives me a little bit, and hopefully the people that are listening gives them a little bit more of an idea of what was going on. I want to drop back a little bit because I've been there, and I remember seeing the Modern signs there. You mentioned the farm, and at the time it was what, Marino Lookout Farm?
Marino Lookout Farm.
And it was I went there with the kids to pick apples, and I saw the Modern sign there, and having worked for Modern, I was always intrigued by, all right, this is Marino Farm. What was, I know you said it was the farming, and how did that acquisition come? How do you acquire a farm?
It was 1990, I believe, 89 or 90. We went into U.S. Trust Bank for a meeting with the president of their bank, and he was foreclosing on these properties. Two marina properties, one in Boston, one in Situate, and Lookout Farm. Two separate owners. The marinas were owned by one group, and the farm was owned by another group. And they asked Les, do you have any interest in buying these properties? And Les looked across the table to me. He said, Bob, what do you think? I don't know anything about marinas, but if you want to buy them, we'll figure it out. And we ended up making a deal with the bank to buy those properties. And then it was just continually upgrading and renovating. And,
right.
We rebuilt the marina commercial wharf.
That was commercial. It was, what's the name of the marina? Is that?
It's Boston Yacht Haven is what we called it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. I think
now it's something else.
Right. And that's one of those forever, not directly, it was existing forever Boston lawsuits regarding access to the waterfront.
Right.
And that can be another episode. But so now you have a marina. You renovated the marina.
Two marinas, one in Situate and one in Boston. And Bruce Raposa, God rest his soul, he's passed on now. Bruce ran the marinas for us. And we had, after the renovation of Boston, it was the premier marina in the city. We were the only ones at that time to handle boats over 250 feet in length.
Right.
And I don't know if that's a proper word, boat, or it's a ship or whatever it is.
You can call it a boat. That's fine.
Beautiful. We had some celebrities that brought their boats there. We had local high-profile business people that brought their big yachts there.
And this is a modern.
This is modern owned, modern operated property. Yes.
All right. So we're managing marinas now. We got Big Dig going. We have
a farm in Natick.
Farm. People are picking apples. We have this holistic health center that's being built.
And you have a boat and bus company.
Okay, let's back up. So that's going to be Boston Harbor Cruises.
Boston Harbor Cruises.
And that was previously owned and then it was acquired, correct?
That's correct. Yep. And
So
the previous owner stayed on to operate it.
So here's my understanding, because we've never talked about the acquisition of Boston Harbor Cruises, but as you're on the Big Dig and you're talking about the Big Dig, shuttling workers back and forth
To Deer Island. That's how we got involved.
And how did the acquisition come about?
We were bidding the Deer Island work, and we needed to get people back and forth. So we talked with the people at Boston Harbor Cruises, and I wasn't involved in that negotiation, but they were just the nicest people to deal with. Les really appreciated how honest and holistic they were, and created a joint venture with them. And Boston Harbor Cruises became a part of the Modern family. And they shuttled people to Deer Island, which is the main purpose. And then we expanded the boat business that was already existing, that the family operated for years and years and years. I mean, sightseeing and whale watching, and the Godzilla boats and the tugboats, and all the other stuff that go along with the Boston waterfront.
So now is there a marine division too?
There is kind of a marine division, but Boston Yacht Haven and Situate were a marina group that fell under my purview, with Bruce being the day-to-day guy there.
Right.
Boston Harbor Cruises was part of the construction company, but operated by the Nolan family, who were the original owners. And we were their joint venture partners.
Nolan's, original Charlestown family,
Yeah.
Okay, so that goes over Boston Harbor Cruises. Now we got a farm.
And we got a bus company.
Got a bus company.
Paul Revere Bus.
Oh, so it's Paul Revere Bus.
Yes.
Okay. And is that still owned by?
That's still owned by the people who are our partners. Again, it was a joint venture to transport people.
Right. We got the farm. We got the bus company. We have fish. We have holistic health. We're branching out here. And was this Les's? Was it just convenience? I know the Boston Harbor Cruises was convenience, but what was like his thought process here? Was it give people jobs and it benefits us? What was the philosophy behind all these different acquisitions?
There was always some kind of tie to the main construction company. We needed land to put equipment and materials. We needed food to feed the restaurants that we had. We needed the marine business to transport people to Deer Island and the harbor work that was going on at the time. It's all related. If you look at the web,
it all feeds off. No pun intended. Feeds off. You said restaurants.
Yep.
We didn't
North
get to
Cambridge
restaurants yet. What were the restaurants?
Marino's Ristorante Marino is the official name of it. We bought a bar room and a liquor license in North Cambridge, and in the 80s, and it sat vacant for a couple of years till we could get it permitted. Les wanted to have a restaurant that the farm would supply the meat and produce for. And so that was the evolution of Marino's restaurant. In 1989, we opened the restaurant. And the restaurant operated until Les died, and the family sold off the restaurant. Became a daycare center, I believe, at the end.
Okay.
But that was, again, celebrities from everywhere would come there.
Right.
The food was unbelievable. Les had his wife, his sister, his brother, and a lot of family members from Italy that would cook authentic Italian food.
Right.
And it was a big attraction. Dan Marino came and took his picture in front of Marino's restaurant when he played against the Patriots.
Right.
So
funny. So that leads me not to the last, because I'm going to ask you again, we'll go over, but one of my favorites here is, St. Lucia is kind of a place that I love to go to St. Lucia. Not anymore, but it was less built up than the other Caribbean islands, and it was just a fantastic place to kind of get away. Now Sandals has bought up just about everything on the island, and it's been commercialized and all kinds of other things going on. But I remember I'm working for Modern. Here we go again. Parallel universes here. I'm working for Modern, and my first wedding anniversary, and for those of you that know me, no jokes at this point, and I scheduled a trip, planned a trip to go down to St. Lucia. So I had already been there once. This is my second go round, and we land, we get in the taxi to go to the airport, and I was off a week from Modern. The big dig was going on, and I took the week off. We go down to St. Lucia. We're in the cab, and we're driving to the hotel from the airport, and as we come to this bend in the road and have to slow down, I look over, and there's a Modern Continental sign on the side of the road with a half demolished building right beside it. And I'm saying, you've got to be kidding me. I'm just leaving Boston literally the day before I was on the big dig with Modern Continental, and now I'm in this Caribbean island, and I see a Modern Continental sign. So again, we fast forward years later. I never figured out what it was. I mentioned to the people that were on the job with me, but they're all out of the hall, and they really didn't know what the situation was. Nobody that I worked with really worked for the company. They were all labor out of the hall, out of the union hall. So fast forward, we at the Terriers, and I tell the story, and you said, oh yeah, that was our Modern project, and that has its own story that goes with it. So what is Modern Continental doing on the island of St. Lucia?
It was there was an engineer on the big dig who visited St. Lucia all the time, fell in love with the island, ran into someone local that said, there's a piece of property right on the ocean that's going to come up for sale. And they brought it to Les. And, Les was a very adventurous guy. He loved to do new things.
As we're finding out more and more.
He probably had ADD, who knows at the time, but, he always loved to go on to the next venture and find the next new thing. And so we went down and looked at the property. He ended up buying it. And then it took us about 7 years to get approvals for almost 500 hotel rooms. And there was going to be a water park, and there was going to be, mid-rise hotel and individual villas with private pools. And we built the first phase, which was 66 units. So back up. Is this before the equipment issue? We sent equipment down there to dig for the foundations.
All right. So you had equipment on the island.
Yeah, we had equipment on the island. That's probably what you saw along with the Modern sign that we put up at the entrance, because the land was off of the main drag a little bit. So we put a sign out by the main drag so that people would know that we're back there. And we started to develop that hillside. It's directly across from Sandals. So if anybody going to Sandals in St. Lucia, the Sandals Grand, if you look across, you'll see a bunch of little buildings on a hillside. That was the first phase of St. Lucia.
Right. And then was it the next phase where you went to start in the equipment customs?
We couldn't we always had problems getting through customs with, equipment and materials. But Kenny, Les's partner, was a whiz at, figuring out how we get stuff there. So he really got us what we needed. We'd call him up, Kenny, we need a bulldozer. We need another backhoe. We need parts. Yeah. And he would get it there. Right. And he'd send a mechanic down, put it all together, and then fly the guy back home.
Right.
And then we opened the hotel in, I think, 2000. 1999, 2000. It finally opened the first phase.
Right.
And ran it until Les died. And then when he died, then everything got liquidated. So St. Lucia got sold to a British hotel company. Mm-hmm. And then 2007 came and wiped out the whole world. It was, the biggest economic downturn in our lifetime.
Right.
And so it sits vacant. I was in St. Lucia 3 years ago, and it was still sitting vacant.
Wow.
So all the hard work that went into it is sitting there vacant.
So we got holistic health centers, we got Marino Lookout Farm, we got cruises, we have fish companies, we have an island oasis hotel in St. Lucia. Anything else that we're not covering that was started, purchased, business?
No, Kenny and Les had the largest equipment fleet east of the Mississippi for a number of years. We had more equipment than just about anybody in the country.
Right.
They ran that out of our Stoughton yard, and it was a huge equipment facility. And Aldo Morelli was the head mechanic there. He ran the shop, and for years until he died, and then some other guys took over. But they had a ton of equipment, so
right.
There was anything you wanted to know about equipment, you called Kenny and he'll tell you.
Right. And so, at some point, I think, if you look at the statistics and you look at the stories, Modern was, grew from Les's kitchen essentially to almost 4,200 employees. And, and you could probably verify 20 different states Modern was running projects in. And you talk about Dan Marino coming to the restaurant and all these people. You're at the bank with the head of the bank. We talked about Les, passed away and the size of the funeral when Les passed away, which I think is a testament to what he did for people.
That's right.
Over the years.
People waited hours in line.
Right.
Hours.
Right. And at that point, so we'll kind of segue here into, 4,200 people, 20 states. And then obviously the issues with the big dig started. The media started picking up on it, and there were some lawsuits and whatnot, leading up. When were you out of Modern Continental? You were out of there.
I left in 2005, a year after Les died.
Okay. And was there did people know that were working for the company that it was kind of coming to?
Yeah, at that point, the bonding company had come in and took over control of it, and everything was being liquidated. I had spent the year that from Les's death to the year I left, we had liquidated, most of the real estate. I think there were over $300 million worth of real estate we liquidated.
Right.
The properties were being sold off, and the money was all being put back into the construction company to finish up those projects that were started.
And how was Les? I know you had a personal relationship with him, obviously. How was he dealing with the? I don't want to say downfall. I don't know if that's, but there was a decline at the end, obviously, of the business. What was his?
He was a very strong individual. He kept telling us, "We're going to get through this. We may have to start over, but we're going to get through it."
Right.
He was very positive all the time. That was just his nature. He never was a downer. He always said, "We can do it." You say, "I don't know if we can." Yeah, we can do it. We'll figure out a way. We'll figure out a way to get it done.
Right.
So, and we always did. We always seemed to find a way.
And then Les passed on, and that was kind of the end of the company. Would you say? Is there?
Yeah, because there was no succession plan ever put in place.
Right. He has family, correct?
Yeah, he has two daughters.
And were they involved in the company?
One of them was the head of our marketing group. She did all our PR and marketing. The oldest daughter was not. She was a stay-at-home mom. And so the girls were involved, but not directly in the construction company.
Right.
They marketed it. Lorraine, who's his youngest daughter, marketed the entire company. I mean, all our companies. So whether it's the boats or the buses, all of that publicity came out of that department.
Right. Does anything exist of Modern now? Is there any?
No, there's nothing that I'm aware of.
Right.
Randomly, you'll see on Instagram, somebody will post a picture of a Modern pickup truck with the logo on it.
They have to be still out there from
or a
auctions
dump
and everything
truck.
else. Right.
But no, there's not much there's nothing in the business aspect of it, but there's like trinkets of equipment or, trucks and.
Yeah. So what did you take from, I mean, all this time with Les, and it's incredible to see how diverse, Les's business was. And as we started off, I was talking about, and never put two and two together pretty much until we were just sitting here today, but how diverse Les's business is. And I don't think you're as diverse as Les, but you have the commercial, I
don't have the ambition he had.
No, but you have the commercial, you have the small mall and you hold on to that and collect rent. Then you'll build a commercial property on contract, renovate a commercial property on contract. You have residential property that you maintain, but you'll also build residential, the high-end, single family. And I've even been on projects where you've renovated. And I think that's similar, keep the guys going, keep the cash flow going for the company. I've been on projects that you've renovated, small renovations, bathrooms, kitchens, and units and whatnot. So what did you take, what would you take away from Les, from working with him? Did you learn from him? Did you learn that from him?
Absolutely. There's no question. That was, you couldn't get the education we got at Modern in a school.
Right.
You just couldn't. Les was so innovative, and Kenny was so knowledgeable about his part of the business. Listening to those two guys constantly talk about what we're going to do next, it was just always forward thinking. And when I started my own company, I said, if I'm going to attract good people to work with me, I need to give them the benefits and things that I had. Obviously not to the extent that Modern had, because Modern was a giant company. We're 8 employees, not counting myself and my wife.
Right.
But our company has health insurance, dental insurance, disability insurance. We have 401k matches. We supply trucks to our supers. Everybody has a gas card to put gas in the trucks. All the benefits that Les gave us, I carried over into my own company. So it's just a transition. I'm a much, much smaller company than we ever were at Modern, but the learning experience you learned about dealing with people and how to handle people and the sensitivity of people's feelings, in our group alone, when Modern was in its heyday, I probably had over 100 people that reported to me. And I'll bet you I spent 50% of my time on people problems.
Yeah.
But I learned, that was a great learning experience for me in my own company, because it's very, without people's sensitivity, they don't feel comfortable.
Right.
So.
Right. So I'll put you on the spot here a little bit. We won't go into some of the things we talked about about Modern and whatnot, but we'll go back. What, you've been in the construction industry for how many years now?
44 years.
44 years in the construction industry. And where are you going? What's next for Sheppard Construction? Obviously, if any of you who are out there listening or see some clips here, we have an Instagram page. The office keeps up I don't even know if you have an Instagram page.
I don't.
You
My
do.
daughter runs the marketing in the
There's
office.
an Instagram. There's a website. You can see some of the projects Bob has done. Well-known builder on the South Shore, very large homes. I drive around Cohasset and Scituate sometimes just to collect my thoughts, and I see houses that you've constructed down there. we actually crossed paths. I was originally an inspector in Hingham, and that's kind of where we originally crossed paths. So you have the residential going, you have the commercial going. What's next? How long are you going to keep this going for?
I don't know. I'm getting up there in age. I don't know how long I can do it. We have, like I said, 2 different companies. I have a commercial. My commercial real estate is in Sheppard Investments, which we own and manage, which will go on forever. Hopefully my kids will take it over. The construction company is a little different. It's a hard business. And, you need someone who really loves the business and wants to be involved in the business day to day. And that's where we're at right now, is trying to backfill a succession plan for me.
Right.
Because I don't want to drop dead and my company fold up because nobody else can do it. There's plenty of people. As you know, they change the president of the United States every 4 years, the most powerful man in the world. So our positions are not, in a bubble.
Right.
People could do what I do if they wanted to, but you have to love the business.
Right.
And we're working on setting up a succession plan so that it can go on if it wants to go on.
Right. So what is currently going on? What do you have that you're wrapping up, or what are you doing now with Sheppard Construction that's active?
We're doing a very large project in Norwell, Mass. We're doing residential and commercial mix. It's a pool house, a pool, and a very large home, and then a
local developer / business owner.
Yes.
Okay.
Honey extraction building that they're going to actually make their own honey on site.
Which I did a code review for. I remember that one. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So that's going on. We just finished a very large home on the water in Cohasset, a lot that I purchased a couple of years ago. Tore down a little house, built a big house. Same thing in Hingham. We closed on a property last week in Hingham where I bought a smaller house. There are no vacant land.
It's all tear downs.
Yeah, it's all tear downs. So we're trying to improve. Whatever we do, we try to improve the neighborhood, make what we're doing fit. And so far, it's been very successful doing that procedure. So we'll continue to do that. We're always looking to purchase, and hold real estate. We're always looking at, nothing major. I'm not looking for a 500,000 square foot office building or anything like that. We buy, small strip centers, small office buildings. We have an office building in Hingham.
Right.
It's completely full.
That's where
our office is.
You have the small mall that's
we have the
Hingham.
strip mall in Hingham.
Yeah.
I own an assisted living project in Michigan. My niece runs. I own some apartments and houses in Michigan. It's my older brother runs for me out there, and that's what keeps us busy.
Right. So if you had a young buck or a young doe woman or coming into the business and wanted to get into development, we've had this discussion when I dabbled a little bit, saying, okay, I've been helping people develop property, for years, and I came to you and I said, okay, what would I have to do? What do I need to do to get? If you had advice, maybe it's not developed, maybe it's don't get into development, maybe it's don't get into construction. But we just talked about bringing people along and training them. But what advice would you give somebody that's looking to get into development or property, or what's the single biggest thing that you'd tell somebody?
You got to have patience, because real estate is a long-term hold if you're going to hold it, and it's a long-term development process to get something approved today. So without patience and without some money behind you, you're not going to be able to sustain what you're doing.
Right.
You know the business. I mean, most of the carpenters that want to become developers never make it because it takes more than knowing how to pound a nail.
Right.
There's a business aspect to it. People say to me all the time, "Oh, you're a builder." I'm a businessman who's in the building business.
Right.
Is the way I always put it, because I need to manage the business side of it. I don't ever swing a hammer. You don't want me to swing a hammer.
Right.
But there's a business side that needs to be paid attention to if you're going to have and operate a company.
Right. Right. All right. What anything else you think you can add? Anything you want to get out there?
No. I wish the general public knew more about Modern Continental's background and what Les and Ken did for communities and people other than what they read in the newspapers.
Right. And that's kind of why, not the main reason why. We've had these conversations off and on over the years. And again, hearing the other perspective, we all know that bad news sells. Terrible news sells.
That's right.
Shock and awe sells. So, I think it was interesting to bring you in and hearing the stories from you. And it's not just this conversation, we centered a lot on Les Marino, but it's also about business development, what people are doing today. And I pointed out earlier that Les was not formally, but he was doing these things in his own, out of his kitchen maybe, and on the phone on Sunday nights. But Les was a people person back then.
Oh, yeah.
And now, again, at the sake of being repetitive, you have these companies that they now have offices in the company dedicated to what, again, Les was doing out of his kitchen. And, my vision is I see, you as a reflection of that, both in your business and in the way that you approach the business and approach your employees. I've met your employees over the years and continuing education, and we have continuing ed over subs and drinks and in the conference room. And that, that's always a great experience. So, well, Bob, thanks for coming. It was a good conversation. And next time maybe we'll down a couple bottles of Cabernet and try it again and see how that one comes out. But
sounds good to me.
But thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, for folks listening, this is going to be a mind fuck. What's going on? Bob, Mike Yanovic just came out and spoke to me. You guys just finished recording, and Mike McDonough here at Focus Forward, both of them came out separately and said, "Oh, hey, this was great. Talked about this, talked about that. A lot of it sounds like a fair amount of real estate investment stuff, which I think I wasn't expecting, but I'm sure the listeners loved." And then I said to Mike, I usually ask the last question, and seeing Mike and Mike both seem very interested in what you had to say, I wanted to hop back on and ask you that question. I didn't want to lose the bite at the apple. So
sure.
Over the next 2, 5, 10 years, it doesn't have to be specific, but over, in the coming future, what do you think we'll see more of? What do you think we'll see less of? And you can pick one or the other. You can answer them both. But from where you sit as both a developer, a contractor, someone with experience at large companies and small companies, what do you think we're going to see coming?
I think you're going to see a slight shift in the way things are built, just because there's less and less workmen and craftsmen over the next 5 to 10 years. I think you'll see more manufactured housing, which will be more acceptable here in the Northeast. It's done in other parts of the country, but we seem to always have that traditional stick-built mentality here.
Yep.
I think that'll be a major swing in our industry. I think that interest rates are going to settle back, not to the levels that we saw at the 2 and 3%, but I think that they're going to be 5 or 6% pretty stable. With a presidential election coming up, there's typically not a lot of movement in the upward swing of interest rates. So I'm suspecting that the feds will stop moving in the upward position unless something happens.
It's interesting that you said that, because I was just listening the other day. The Fed said that they are going to do a pause on the interest rates, but then down the line they're going to tick them up again, in the future quarters.
Yeah.
Huh. So right in line. There you go.
That's my take on it. I think that what you're going to see less and less of is in the Northeast where we are and we're concentrated. The availability to develop new projects are only going to happen if you can take down older projects and revitalize those areas.
Just because shortage of
there's just no land. They don't make anymore.
And now, do you think it's going to be a mix back to your not stick-built outlook? Do you think it's going to be prefabrication, or do you think it's going to be full-on modular?
I think it's going to be fabrication in panels, and with the stretch energy codes being constantly changed.
That's exactly where my mind was going.
The only way you're going to accomplish some of these energy thresholds is to have multi-layered wall systems, and it's going to be much easier to manufacture those panels in a controlled atmosphere and then assemble them on site.
Yeah, and then even the modular. So you, like you said, you get the energy compliance by you building it in a factory, having it extremely tight, designed properly. You lose the variability of out on site, like, oh, hey, we tried to make the envelope super tight, but somebody did a flash and detail wrong, and now you've got water behind there and it can't escape. And it eliminates those issues, right? It doesn't
correct.
Eliminate, but you've got a factory built product versus a custom built by people that are transient in nature, right? Showing up on site, coming and going.
Right.
But then I think the other piece with modular to kind of see an additional value is the new 241 codes that are making you do fire exposure analysis, have security guards full-time on site. All of those costs
are getting rolled in.
But if you go modular and you put in
eliminate
10
that.
boxes, you eliminate that, right? You deliver it, you bolt them together, and you liven up the system, and now no security guard needed, no worry about how am I going to get the stairs enclosed as we build this, all that kind of stuff. So that's a great point. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, and I think too that you're going to find that we're going to have to figure out as a country how to build more workforce affordable housing for the hardworking American people that just aren't going to be able to buy multi-million-dollar homes. There's got to be a solution. We haven't found it yet.
Yep.
But there has to be a solution down the line that somebody comes up with to make affordable housing really affordable. And I think it could start with some of the cities and towns looking at land owned by them and offering it up for development with very little or no land cost to the developer, and in exchange, the developer builds that affordable component.
Yeah. It almost, you mean affordable in the sense of like true affordable, or kind of like market rate middle income?
It's more market rate middle income. We call it workforce housing because it's for the firemen and the school teachers and the policemen and the people that are true professionals that can't live in the communities they want to live in.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. It's something we have to solve because, I've been saying to people for ages, for 10 years now, I feel like Boston is quickly becoming San Francisco in the way that it is extremely wealthy people and poor people, and then the middle class is going to be just completely wiped out.
That's right.
From where we are right now. We've got to solve that problem. Do you think, and I'll forward it to you, MIT and Wentworth did an interesting study where they looked at the increase in cost of the energy code and what effect that will have on affordable housing. And they had some really good data on affordable housing here in Massachusetts. I'd love to forward that to you and see what you...
Yeah, I'd love to take a look at it.
Yeah, see what you think about it. And one of the things that they proposed in there was adjustment to land use zoning as a way to make things more affordable.
Right.
And I think there's some merit there, right? Is a 2 or 3 family on a lot just as of right? There are some states, I think Oregon did that, and they did it in rings, and they said, if you're outside of, or if you're within so many miles of an urban core, single family zoning is illegal. I don't know if I want the
Right,
state jumping in and saying that.
Right.
I'm not saying that's the answer, but I think do you think some land use kind of regulations or zoning might help with that?
Absolutely, because every town you go into, I don't care what town you're working in or around, nobody wants to have something of less value built next to them than what they're living in. And I get it. It's their most people's nest egg for their,
That's
life
the rub.
and their family.
Yep.
But what we have to do, and we can't forget, is how do we keep the firemen and the policemen and the nurses and the school teachers
And the carpenters and the pipe
and the
fitters, right?
carpenters,
People we work
the
with every day.
electricians, the plumbers, they can't necessarily afford these multi-million-dollar homes. And I'm like the pot calling the kettle black, because
That's what you're building.
we're building multi-million-dollar homes in the markets we're in, but it's also something that's always been in my mind, that we have to be able to find a way that people can live in Massachusetts and still work here in the average person's life.
Yeah. No, but I'm going to speculate here. You're building those out of necessity, right?
That's correct.
You don't have you'll build nothing, right? Because you would love to probably build something that a middle income person could move into,
Absolutely.
but the numbers don't work.
Right. You can't afford to build an affordable unit on a piece of dirt on the South Shore of Massachusetts that I've been associated with anyway.
Yeah.
The cost of land is so expensive.
Yeah, and that's why you're saying that what can town-owned land,
That's right.
stuff like that, kind of.
How can that get converted
fill the
to
gap?
the housing piece that we're missing?
Do you if you don't, sorry, I know I'm asking you a lot of questions here, but I think you've got a good perspective. Like now, so having done work outside of Massachusetts as well, do you think, like I kind of have the opinion that I think New Hampshire is really going to benefit. They are already benefiting due to our high cost of housing. I guess maybe to some degree tax policy, but that's just really moving money around. You're paying more in real estate tax or whatever. But they are experiencing more volume happening there. The company that I interviewed out of Vermont, they're looking to open a New Hampshire office because a lot more of their work is happening there. Do you think the new regulations between energy code, fire code, do you think that makes other states more palatable to build
Absolutely,
affordably?
because the cost of all these additional regulations are just adding to the cost of building the product. And it's not that someone's just going to say, I'll take a hit and I'll eat that cost. It gets loaded
Goes somewhere.
in.
Yep.
And somebody's paying for it. And at the end of the day, you can only put 5 pounds of stuff in 5 pound bag.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, and even we were chatting beforehand, before you and Mike started recording, the Boston Water and Sewer is now looking to surcharge for, water runoff on a parking lot. It's another cost. And you look at Birdo in Boston and some of the other communities where now you're paying a fee based off of energy use and carbon emissions. So, if you look at your water, now your energy, and there's new safety ordinances. And, Mike and I are in the business of life safety, but, these are all costs.
Right.
And we can't just ignore them. In the same way, the energy code, we can't ignore those costs, or 241, the costs that go along with that. So, no, that's very interesting. I would love to see that happen with that middle income housing.
I'm a big fan of it. I'm very interested in seeing how, and it probably won't happen in my lifetime, but the next group of builders and developers are going to have to deal with more of that situation because people have to live somewhere.
Yep.
Otherwise, you end up like San Francisco, where they've got as many people living on the street as they have in their public housing.
Yeah. No. Well, we need people like you to help move the ball. And like there's organizations like Strong Towns that are doing some interesting work around just about what you're talking about. And I think you need people that have that experience and have that time that can speak to this stuff. So let's give it a shot.
All right.
Awesome, Bob.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.